Hey, whoa! You both seen Buster Scruggs?
What is up, Netflix fans, and welcome back to my channel. I just watched the brand new Coen Brothers movie, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. And this film is crazy. There is so much to talk about. If you guys don't know how my reviews work, I usually like to talk about the good, the bad, and then give you my score. But since this is a movie that is comprised of basically multiple short films, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each little segment of this movie. I'm going to review those individually, and then at the end, I'm going to give you my overall thoughts. Let's start out with the very first story, and that's The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the entire movie, is basically an anthology film comprised of 6 stories, each dealing with a different aspect in the Old West. What an interesting thing for the Coen brothers to tackle. I'm so glad they were the ones to do it because of course they have experience with westerns like True Grit and one of my favorite movies of all time. It's in my top 20, No Country for Old Men. That is my favorite Coen brothers film. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Coen brothers movie is. I love Fargo. I love True Grit. I love so many of their films, so I was really excited for this. But we are starting with the first little short story, and that is the title of the entire movie, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. And I understand why they started with this one, because this was such an interesting character exploration. Surreal, outlandish. It establishes this world that they're going for in this first particular short film, and it was so entertaining because this guy basically knows he's in this old-timey western, right? He's walking around and riding his horse around, singing straight to the camera, and he is telling us everything that we would be thinking if this was a normal western, except we have a character in the movie kind of saying, you know, this thing that happens and this thing that happens. I thought it was a beautiful satire. Maybe my favorite 17 or 18 minutes, however long it was, satire of a Western movie I have ever seen. There was so much this first short story that entertained me. It was cool. It takes like 3 to 4 minutes just to kind of know what they're going for and get on board. And then of course you realize that it is multiple short stories, but if the book didn't give that away at the beginning, I don't know what would have. And we're talking non-spoilers, of course, so I'm not going to get into what happens, but I will just say that it reminded me of a cartoon, but not in a bad way. What I mean by that is it's breaking the rules of reality as careless as a cartoon would have and could have, something that I would see in like Looney Tunes, just not on that insane level, more down to earth, but I really like this first short story, and it got me super sucked into this movie as a whole. The next one is called Near Algodones, I don't know how to pronounce. I'm not good at that stuff. I'm from Kentucky. And boom, first thing you see, James Franco pops up on screen, walks into a bank, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be interesting. And James Franco was not playing James Franco. Usually, there's not too much range to him, even though I really enjoy him as an actor. He changes up his voice just a little bit, like he did in The Disaster Artist, and we have a pretty interesting story. Now, this one is probably, I think it's the shortest one of all of them. But my 2 favorite aspects of this one is the dialogue and the irony of the story. I'm not going to tell you how it plays out, but it involves a rope in multiple situations and occasions. And whenever those parts happen and James Franco says his lines of dialogue, I was literally laughing out loud because first of all, his delivery was great, but the dialogue in this may have been some of the best that I saw in any of the short stories. This was a cool one, nothing to write home about. It's not like, oh my gosh, you have to check out this short story, but I still really enjoyed it. Once again, super on board with this film at this point in the story. The next one is called Meal Ticket with Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson just comes out of nowhere, and he is the star of this one, and I thought this one was a little slower. It's definitely a shift from the first 2, and that's one negative that I'll bring up later, is the stories I thought they would kind of have a connection, or they would somehow go together cohesively. It's kind of like the Coen brothers sat down, they're like, all right, we have these 6 ideas, some of them are similar, some of them aren't similar, but how do we get these stories across? We just put them all into one movie, which is fine, and I thought it worked as a whole, but this one was very different than the last 2. It wasn't as talkative or funny, it was more of a heartfelt tale. I was sitting there like, oh, this is nice. It's telling a sweet story, and then the farther you go along, the more you realize it's not the story that you expected at the beginning of it. I liked the little twist that they put in there, and Liam Neeson's character shifts from, oh, this is a really nice guy, to, something else. The story hits on what you have to do to survive, obsession, greed, and then what happens at the end was maybe one of the most interesting things that happened in this entire movie. I'm not going to say I loved it because it was a little bit like, ugh, but you know, it happened, and this was another pretty solid short story. Now, The Gold Canyon. This one is a little long, and I could see some people complaining about the length and how there isn't a lot of dialogue, just one guy doing his thing, trying to collect gold, but then at the end, it all really came together for me. Something happens, and while I was sitting there appreciating how beautiful the scenery was and how well the performance was, I wasn't like, oh, this is my favorite one so far, but by the end, after the event happens and you realize what it was a metaphor for, I think this may have been either my favorite or tied for my favorite with Buster Scruggs. It just shows hard work and how hard people work for things back then, and sometimes that can be stripped away. There are a lot of great things that go within this. I think this was the one with the most depth, potentially my favorite, and I think if you're going to watch one with an artistic eye, this is the one to watch. The next one is The Gal Who Got Rattled, and this one started out a little slow, a little boring. I'm like, all right, we're going to pick it up. It's very different than the other ones. Once again, these stories continue to go in different directions, which some people are going to like. I didn't necessarily hate it. I was like, oh, okay, it is what it is, and I accept that. And I was trying to get into this story. The problem was that I kind of knew what was going to happen. I didn't know how the events were going to go down. I just knew that the events were going to turn out that way. And even though this story wasn't necessarily my favorite, it did bring up a point in my head that really made me like this movie as a whole more than I thought I was going to when I was actually sitting down watching the film. This one goes on so long that you almost forget you're watching a series of anthology short films. It feels like its own thing. And these characters don't know that they are in a short movie. They think they're in their own epic story, and that's why every time you get to the end of one of these short films, you don't know who is going to make it out, what's going to happen, because this isn't one long epic story. An important character could bite it, a major twist could happen, it may not end all, oh, that was a sweet ending, because it's not one long epic movie, and the Coen brothers know that, they realize that, so they know they can take risks with the storytelling, and they know they can make some very drastic decisions by the end, and I think that's the beauty of The Ballad of Buster Scruggs as a whole, and this one really, while it wasn't my favorite one, it kind of pointed out that fact to me, so I thought that was really cool. The Mortal Remains is the final short story. I don't really know why they ended with this one because it may have been my least favorite. It was kind of long, drawn out, really good dialogue, a great script, and probably the best use of color correction. When they shift from day to night, I thought that was beautiful, but it just wasn't really one that hooked me. Good dialogue, but that wasn't enough. It also felt way less Western than the other ones. I felt sort of a genre shift, and that kept it inconsistent with the other short stories, one of my problems that I discussed earlier. Overall, this one wasn't my favorite. The last two as a whole didn't really bring me in like the other ones did, but they weren't bad. Good writing, good color correction. You know, the Coen brothers, they're gonna bring that aspect. So those were all 6 short stories. Now, they come together in an interesting way, like I said. Not all of it fit, not all of it worked, and this movie feels a little jumpy at times, but I get what the Coen brothers was going for. They had 6 really good ideas. They brought them together in a really cool way, a little storybook way, kind of like Winnie the Pooh, you know? Did I just compare a Coen brothers movie to Winnie the Pooh? I did. While I didn't knock the storytelling out of the park like I wanted it to, I still thought it was really good. The Coen brothers took a risk here. I think it paid off. It's one of the better Netflix movies I have seen this year on a technical level. As a whole, I think it worked. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is really cool. One of the most inventive movies I have seen all year, especially on Netflix. You know, I didn't love the ending of the final story, and the ending as a whole, it's a bit abrupt, but they tried something new, it worked, and I think this is something that more storytellers are going to try in the future. While they didn't knock it out of the park like I wanted them to, I still really enjoyed this movie as a whole, and that is why I'm going to give The Ballad of Buster Scruggs a 75%. I was sitting here thinking, you know, probably 3/4 of this movie knocked it out of the park, so I'm going to give it a 75%. Once again, you guys definitely should check this out. Even if you don't like certain short stories, there's definitely 1 or 2 that you will find in there that you will really like. I think it would have worked better as a TV show. That's what I thought they were going for originally until I found out it was a movie, but still, Really, really good job, Coen brothers. You're breaking barriers and you're doing something new. I really like that. So thank you guys for watching this longer movie review than normal. They've been going a little long lately, but you know what? I have a lot to talk about. Huge day for me today. I'm right in the middle of Narcos Mexico. I have 2 more Netflix movies. I still want to see Widows, Instant Family. My goodness, guys, there's just not enough time in a day to get to all of these things, but we have some very special things coming on later in the day. Oh yeah, new episode of Titans. I gotta get on this. You guys are the absolute best. I'll catch you later.